He rewrote the will 3 days before he passed. The attorney's words landed like stones in still water. I watched the ripples spread across the mahogany conference table. Victoria, my stepmother, squeezed Trevor's hand. My half-brother smiled back at her. They looked like survivors of some noble battle. Your father wanted everything to go to his immediate household, the attorney continued, shuffling papers without meeting my eyes. The estate, valued at $15 million, will be divided between Victoria and Trevor. Silence swallowed the room whole. My lungs forgot how to work. 3 days before Dad died, he couldn't remember my name. He couldn't lift a glass of water. He couldn't sign his own name without his hand shaking like a leaf in a storm. Every face in that room turned toward me, waiting for tears, waiting for me to break down, waiting for the explosion they'd prepared for. My name is Delilah Bennett, and in that frozen moment I understood something with crystal clarity. My father did not rewrite that will in his right mind. They were counting on grief to silence me. They were wrong. The final week of Dad's life haunted me like a ghost I couldn't shake. Victoria had suddenly become the gatekeeper. He needs rest, she'd say whenever I called. Her voice was always sweet, always concerned, always blocking my path. She started answering his phone, screening his messages, even mine, especially mine. I'd been visiting every single day for 2 months. Then suddenly the nurses said I wasn't on the approved visitor list anymore. Family only, they'd say, which made no sense because I was his daughter, his oldest child, the one who'd held his hand through his first round of chemotherapy 5 years ago. The day before that new will was supposedly signed, a nurse with kind eyes pulled me aside in the hallway. She glanced over her shoulder like she was sharing state secrets. If you want to see him clearly, she whispered, come very early, before the morning medications. I came at 6 the next morning. Dad's eyes were open but empty. He looked at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong room. My heart shattered into pieces small enough to slip through my ribs. When the attorney finally showed me a copy of the new will, my stomach dropped through the floor. The signature was all wrong. Dad's handwriting had always been bold and confident, even when he was sick. This signature looked like someone had signed it during an earthquake. The letters trembled and wavered. Some didn't even connect properly. I held the paper up to the light, studying every shaky curve. Trevor leaned back in his leather chair across the conference table. His smirk was small but unmistakable. He knew who actually showed up for him at the end, Trevor said. His voice carried just enough edge to cut. That was the exact moment something inside me changed. The grief that had been crushing my chest transformed into something sharper, something focused. I stopped mourning and started investigating. If they wanted a fight, they'd picked the wrong daughter. Dad had taught me to be thorough. He'd taught me to never accept things at face value. He'd taught me to fight for what was right. Time to use those lessons against the people trying to erase me from his life. 3 days after the funeral, a family friend named Bethany accidentally forwarded me a text message. She'd meant to send it to someone else but hit my name instead. The message was from Trevor, sent the night before Dad's will was allegedly rewritten. It was time-stamped at 11:47 in the evening. The message was short. Just 4 words that made my blood turn to ice. Tomorrow. It's handled. I read it 7 times, each time feeling my pulse quicken. Handled? What was handled? What happens tomorrow? The timestamp proved this was sent hours before Dad supposedly called that attorney to his hospital bedside. Hours before he supposedly decided to cut me out of his life completely. Hours before he supposedly chose to leave everything to Victoria and Trevor instead. I screenshot the message immediately. Then I forwarded it to my own email, my cloud storage, and printed 3 copies. Whatever game they were playing, they'd just given me the first real piece of evidence. Trevor had known something was happening the next day. He'd been confident about it. He'd called it handled like it was a business transaction. I requested Dad's complete hospital records the following week. The hospital administrator said it would take 3 business days to process. On day 2, I got a call from Victoria's attorney. Your stepmother is concerned about your intentions, he said smoothly. She's filing a motion to block the release of those records. My hand tightened around the phone. He was my father, I said. Legally, you have no grounds. We'll see about that, the attorney replied. But I'd already anticipated this move. I'd filed my request through a lawyer friend who specialized in medical privacy law. The records arrived at my door the next morning via courier. I spread them across my kitchen table, my hands trembling as I opened the first folder. The sedation chart made my stomach turn. Dad had been given a heavy dose of morphine at 8:15 in the morning. The will was supposedly signed at 10:30. Less than 3 hours later. While the morphine was still flooding his system. While his brain was drowning in medication strong enough to knock out a horse. The notes in the margin were even worse. Patient experiencing significant drowsiness. Difficulty maintaining alertness. The attorney who drafted the new will was a man named Howard Finch. I'd never heard Dad mention his name before, which was strange because Dad had used the same estate attorney, Bernard Knox, for 23 years. Bernard had been like an uncle to me growing up. Why would Dad suddenly switch attorneys in his final days? I started digging into Howard Finch's background. He specialized in quick estate modifications. His website bragged about efficient bedside services for time-sensitive situations. That phrase made my skin crawl. Time-sensitive situations. Like a dying man who might not last another week? I pulled the hospital security logs through another legal request. The timestamps told their own story. Howard Finch had entered Dad's hospital room at 10:22 in the morning. He'd left at 10:34. 12 minutes. 12 minutes total to discuss a complete rewrite of a $15 million estate. 12 minutes to explain the implications, answer questions, and witness a signature. That wasn't legal counsel. That was a transaction. A rush job. Something designed to look legitimate without actually being legitimate. I added Howard Finch to my growing list of witnesses to contact. Tracking down the night nurse took 3 weeks. Her name was Carla, and she'd left the hospital 2 weeks after Dad passed. I found her working at a clinic across town. At first she refused to talk to me. I can't discuss patients, she said, her eyes darting toward the clinic entrance. Please, I said. I'm not asking you to break any rules. I just need to understand what happened to my father. Something in my voice must have reached her. She glanced around the parking lot, then pulled me to the side of the building. Your dad was a sweet man, she said quietly. He talked about you constantly. My throat tightened. What did he say? Carla's eyes filled with sympathy. He kept asking for you. Every night during my shifts, he'd ask when Delilah was coming. He'd get confused about why you weren't there. He said you always came to see him. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not Victoria? I managed to ask. Carla shook her head firmly. Not Trevor. Another shake. He asked for you. Only you. I thanked her and walked back to my car on shaking legs. Dad had been asking for me while they told everyone I'd abandoned him. That evening I went through every voicemail on my phone from the past 3 months. I'd saved them all, unable to delete Dad's voice. Most were short check-ins, his voice getting weaker with each message. Then I found it. A voicemail I'd somehow missed, buried between spam calls and work messages. The timestamp showed it was left at 9:30 in the evening, the night before the new will was signed. Before the heavy sedation began, I pressed play with trembling fingers. Lila. Dad's voice was weak but unmistakably him. He always called me Lila, a nickname from childhood. Something doesn't feel right here. Victoria keeps talking about paperwork and Trevor keeps asking strange questions about the house. I need you to call me back. Soon as you can. His voice cracked. I love you, sweetheart. Call me. The message ended. I checked my call log. I had called back that same night at 10:15. The call had lasted 3 seconds. Someone had answered and immediately hung up. I tried twice more. Both times the same thing. 3 seconds, then disconnection. Victoria had taken his phone. She'd intercepted my calls. She'd made sure I couldn't reach him when he needed me most. Within days, the family turned on me completely. Cousins I'd grown up with suddenly stopped answering my texts. My Aunt Diane, Dad's sister, called me to say she was disappointed in my behavior. Trevor told us you were never there, she said coldly. He said you only showed up when you heard about the money. The accusation stung worse than a slap. That's not true, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was there every single day until Victoria blocked me. Victoria says you're making things up now, Diane continued. She says you're upset because your father finally saw through your manipulation. Manipulation? I'd been the one taking time off work to sit with Dad during his treatments. I'd been the one researching experimental therapies at 3 in the morning. I'd been the one holding him when he cried about being scared to die. But they were building a narrative. Brick by brick, they were constructing a story where I was the villain. The greedy daughter. The absent child. The manipulator. It was working. Even people who'd known me my entire life were starting to believe it. I realized then that this wasn't just about money. This was about destroying my credibility before I could fight back. I hired a private investigator named Felix. Within 2 weeks, he'd uncovered information that made everything click into place. Victoria's boutique clothing store was drowning in debt. She'd taken out 3 business loans in the past 18 months, all maxed out. The store was weeks away from bankruptcy. Trevor's gambling problem was worse than anyone knew. Felix found records of casino visits, online betting accounts, and personal loans from questionable sources. He owed money to people who didn't accept payment plans. Together, they were staring down a financial crisis that would have destroyed them both. Then Dad got sick. Really sick. Terminal cancer with maybe 6 months left. I watched Felix's presentation with growing horror. The timeline was damning. Victoria had started acting strange around Dad right after her 3rd loan was denied. Trevor had suddenly become attentive, visiting the hospital daily after years of barely calling. They'd seen a dying man with a $15 million estate. They'd seen a solution to all their problems. They'd seen an opportunity. And they'd taken it. Digging deeper into the medical records, I found something else that made my blood boil. 2 weeks before Dad died, Victoria had somehow become his medical power of attorney. Dad had always told me I was his power of attorney. We'd signed the paperwork together 5 years ago, after his first cancer scare. He'd been insistent about it. "You're the only one I trust to make the right decisions," he'd said. So how had Victoria replaced me? I found the document buried in the hospital's legal files. The signature looked wrong. The date was suspicious. It had been filed during a week when Dad's cognitive function was already declining rapidly according to the medical notes. His oncologist had documented increased confusion and disorientation during that exact period. Yet somehow Dad had supposedly requested this change. Supposedly decided his wife of only 4 years should have complete control over his medical decisions instead of his daughter of 32 years. The document had been witnessed by Trevor and Howard Finch, the same attorney who would later draft the new will. They weren't just rewriting his will. They'd been systematically removing my authority and access for weeks, building their control piece by piece while Dad was too sick to understand what was happening. I couldn't fight this alone anymore. I contacted a forensic medical specialist named Dr. Brennan who'd testified in similar cases. I sent him Dad's complete medical records, the timeline of events, and the sedation charts. He called me 3 days later. "Miss Bennett, I've reviewed everything carefully," he said. His voice was grave. "Your father's medical state at the time of the will signing shows highly impaired decision capacity." I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. "You're certain?" "Absolutely. The combination of morphine, his underlying condition, and the documented confusion makes it medically impossible for him to have had the mental capacity for complex financial decisions." Dr. Brennan paused. "In my professional opinion, anyone who witnessed that signature and claimed he was of sound mind was either incompetent or dishonest." Those words settled into my bones like armor. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being paranoid or emotional or greedy like they'd claimed. The medical evidence supported everything I'd suspected. Dad hadn't rewritten that will willingly. He'd been manipulated while drowning in medication and confusion. They'd taken advantage of a dying man. And I was going to prove it. I filed the formal will contest in probate court the following Monday. I didn't announce it. I didn't warn anyone. I simply walked into the courthouse with my attorney, filed the paperwork, and walked back out. The explosion came that evening. Victoria called screaming. "How dare you?" she shrieked into the phone. "Your father made his wishes clear. You're spitting on his grave." I kept my voice calm and even. If Dad was truly in his right mind, the medical records will prove it. I'm simply asking for transparency. Trevor sent a series of hostile text messages. He called me pathetic, greedy, and delusional. He said I was tearing the family apart over money I didn't deserve. He said Dad would be ashamed of me. Each message was designed to hurt, to make me doubt myself, to make me back down. But I'd learned something important. Their panic was proof. If they were truly confident in the legitimacy of that will, they'd welcome an investigation. Instead, they were attacking, desperately trying to intimidate me into silence. Let them underestimate me. Let them think I was too emotional to follow through. I'd spent my whole life being underestimated. Time to use it as a weapon. 2 weeks later, they staged what they called a family intervention. Aunt Diane arranged it at her house, claiming we needed to work things out before this got uglier. I walked into her living room to find Victoria, Trevor, and half a dozen relatives sitting in a circle like some twisted therapy session. "We're worried about you, Delilah," Aunt Diane began gently. "This lawsuit is tearing our family apart. Your father would be heartbroken to see this," my uncle added. Victoria dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I loved him. We just want to honor his final wishes." They took turns talking, telling me I was being selfish, telling me I was disrespecting Dad's memory, telling me that even if I won, I'd lose everyone who mattered. I sat quietly through it all, waiting. When they finally finished, I looked directly at Victoria. "I'll make you a deal," I said calmly. "If the medical evidence proves Dad was in his right mind when he signed that will, I'll drop the case immediately and walk away." Victoria's confident expression flickered. Just for a second. Just long enough. "But if he wasn't," I continued, "if he was confused or impaired or manipulated, then you need to accept the consequences." Victoria didn't blink. But she also didn't answer. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. That's when I knew for certain. She couldn't promise the evidence would support her story, because she knew it wouldn't. The discovery process was brutal and revealing. My attorney filed motions for hospital communications, staff notes, and witness statements. Victoria's legal team fought every request, which only made them look more suspicious. Finally, the judge ordered full disclosure. The documents arrived in 3 large boxes. I spent an entire weekend going through them with my attorney, my investigator, and Dr. Brennan. We found gold. A nursing note from 2 hours before the will signing documented Dad as confused, disoriented, unable to recognize family members consistently. Another note mentioned he'd asked for his first wife multiple times, even though she died 20 years ago. The hospital's internal communications showed concerns from multiple staff members. One nurse had written an email to her supervisor questioning why legal documents were being signed when the patient was clearly impaired. The supervisor had forwarded it to the hospital's legal department. Then nothing. No response. No investigation. Just silence. Someone had decided to look the other way. Someone had let it happen. We compiled everything into a presentation that would make Victoria's attorneys sweat. This wasn't just about a questionable will anymore. This was about systemic failure, possible elder abuse, and potential fraud. The stakes had just gotten much higher for everyone involved. Howard Finch's deposition was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in downtown Phoenix. I sat in the back of the conference room, watching him squirm under questioning. My attorney, Bernard Knox, Dad's original attorney who'd agreed to represent me, was methodical and precise. "Mr. Finch, did you conduct any cognitive assessment before having Mr. Bennett sign this will?" Howard shifted in his seat. I observed him. He seemed aware of what he was signing. "But did you conduct a formal assessment? Did you ask specific questions to test his understanding?" I relied on the family's assurance that he was lucid. Bernard leaned forward. "The family being Victoria Bennett and Trevor Bennett? The 2 primary beneficiaries?" "Yes. Did you find it unusual that a man would completely disinherit his daughter of 32 years without any prior discussion or warning?" Howard's face reddened. People make surprising decisions at the end of their lives. "Did you ask Mr. Bennett why he was making this change?" A long pause. "No." "Did you review his previous will?" "No." "Did you speak to him about his relationship with his daughter?" "No." The courtroom murmured. Victoria's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. 12 minutes suddenly seemed even more suspicious when you realized Howard hadn't asked a single meaningful question. The security footage arrived on a Thursday. The hospital had initially claimed they deleted it after 90 days. But my investigator had connections with their IT department. Someone had made a backup. The video was grainy but damning. It showed Trevor outside Dad's hospital room at 8:45 in the morning on the day of the will signing. He was pacing, gesturing angrily, pointing toward the door. At 9:15 Victoria arrived. They spoke in harsh whispers. Trevor kept pointing at his watch. At 9:30 Howard Finch appeared in the hallway. They had a brief conversation. Trevor handed him something, probably the prepared will. At 9:45 a nurse went into the room. She came out looking confused. She approached Victoria and said something. Victoria's body language was aggressive. She cut the nurse off mid-sentence. At 10:20, all three of them entered Dad's room together. The nurse from earlier watched from down the hall, her expression troubled. She pulled out her phone and appeared to be typing something. We later discovered that was when she'd sent the email to her supervisor, the one that had been ignored. The video wasn't subtle. It showed premeditation, planning, pressure. It showed everything we needed to prove this wasn't Dad's decision. This was their operation, carried out while he was helpless to stop it. The day the attending physician was subpoenaed, I saw Victoria's confidence crack for the first time. Dr. Hammond had been Dad's primary hospital physician during those final weeks. He'd overseen the pain management protocol and monitored Dad's cognitive state daily. Victoria's attorney tried everything to block his testimony. They claimed doctor-patient privilege. They claimed the testimony was irrelevant. They claimed it would set a dangerous precedent. The judge denied every objection. Dr. Hammond would testify under oath about Dad's mental state. I couldn't sleep the night before the hearing. Everything hinged on this. If the doctor said Dad was lucid, I would lose. Not just the case. Not just the money. I'd lose my father's reputation. I'd lose any chance of clearing his name. I'd be remembered as the greedy daughter who couldn't accept her father's final wishes. But if the doctor told the truth. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early. Victoria and Trevor were already there, whispering urgently with their legal team. When Victoria saw me, something ugly flashed across her face. She knew what was coming. She knew the doctor wouldn't lie under oath. The question was whether he'd tell the whole truth or hide behind careful legal language. We were about to find out. Dr. Hammond took the stand at 10:15. He was in his mid-50s with gray hair and steady hands. He'd been practicing medicine for 27 years. Bernard Knox approached the witness stand carefully. Dr. Hammond, you were Benjamin Bennett's attending physician during his final hospitalization, correct? Yes. Can you describe his medical condition during the week of June 14th? Dr. Hammond pulled out his notes. Mr. Bennett was in advanced stage 4 pancreatic cancer. His liver was failing. He was on significant pain management medications including morphine, delivered through an 4 drip. Can you describe his cognitive state during that week? The doctor took a deep breath. Mr. Bennett was experiencing acute cognitive impairment. This was due to multiple factors. The cancer spread to his liver affecting his mental clarity, the high doses of morphine necessary for pain control, and hepatic encephalopathy, which is confusion caused by liver failure. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. In your medical opinion, was Mr. Bennett capable of understanding complex financial decisions on June 15th? Dr. Hammond met my eyes across the courtroom. Then he looked at Victoria. Then back at Bernard. No. At the time the will was executed, Mr. Bennett was experiencing severe cognitive impairment. He was not capable of complex financial decisions. Victoria's attorney, a sharp woman named Christina Wells, stood for cross-examination. She looked confident, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Dr. Hammond, isn't it true that cognitive impairment can fluctuate? That patients can have clear moments. Yes, that's possible. So Mr. Bennett could have had a lucid moment when the will was signed? Unlikely. The medical records show he was given morphine at 8:15 that morning. The effects would have peaked around the time of the signing. But you weren't in the room when the will was signed, correct? Correct. Christina smiled slightly. So you can't definitively say he wasn't having a clear moment. Dr. Hammond's expression hardened. I can say that based on his condition, the medications in his system, and the documented confusion throughout that day, it would be medically irresponsible to consider him capable of making informed decisions about a $15 million estate. Christina tried another angle. Doctors can be wrong about cognitive states, can't they? We can. But in this case, my assessment was supported by nursing notes, cognitive tests, and observed behaviors documented by multiple staff members. She pressed harder. Did anyone specifically tell you not to allow legal documents to be signed? No, but that's because we assumed family members wouldn't take advantage of an impaired patient. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Take advantage. Dr. Hammond had just accused Victoria and Trevor of exploiting Dad's condition. Christina sat down abruptly, realizing she'd made it worse. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Reeves, leaned forward in her chair. The whole courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Mrs. Bennett, she said, addressing Victoria directly, the medical testimony indicates your husband was significantly impaired when this will was signed. Can you explain why you proceeded with changing his estate plan under those circumstances? Victoria stood slowly. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the table. Your Honor, my husband expressed his wishes clearly to me over several months. He wanted to provide for his immediate household. I was simply helping him execute his long-stated intentions. Did these long-stated intentions include disinheriting his daughter? Victoria's face flushed. Delilah had distanced herself from the family. Benjamin was hurt by her absence. The medical records indicate he repeatedly asked for her during his final days, the judge said flatly. The nursing notes document him asking for Delilah, or Lila, on multiple occasions. Victoria's mouth opened and closed. She had no answer. The judge turned to Trevor. Mr. Bennett, were you aware of your father's impaired state when this will was signed? Trevor stood, trying to project confidence. My father knew what he wanted. He told me personally he intended to leave everything to my mother and me. When did he tell you this? Several times over the previous months. Do you have any documentation of these conversations? Text messages? Emails? Recorded conversations? Trevor's confidence evaporated. No, Your Honor. They were private family discussions. The judge's expression suggested she didn't believe a word. The ruling came 3 weeks later. I sat in the same courtroom, my hands folded in my lap. Victoria and Trevor sat across the aisle, their bodies rigid with tension. Judge Reeves entered and we all stood. She didn't waste time with preliminaries. After reviewing the medical evidence, witness testimony, and circumstances surrounding the execution of the will dated June 15th, this court finds that Benjamin Bennett lacked the mental capacity to execute a valid will on that date. I felt my chest expand with air I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The evidence clearly shows Mr. Bennett was under the influence of heavy medications, experiencing documented cognitive impairment, and unable to consistently recognize family members. The testimony of Dr. Hammond, supported by nursing notes and medical records, demonstrates that Mr. Bennett was in no condition to make informed decisions about his estate. Victoria made a small sound like something breaking inside her. Therefore, the will dated June 15th is invalid and unenforceable. The previous will, dated April 3rd, remains the controlling document for the distribution of Mr. Bennett's estate. Trevor's face had gone completely white. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court is referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of possible elder abuse and fraud. The gavel came down. The sound echoed through the silent courtroom like thunder. The aftermath unfolded like dominoes falling. First, Victoria's debt became public record during the fraud investigation. The newspapers picked up the story. Local businesswoman accused of manipulating dying husband's will. Her boutique closed within 2 weeks. Trevor's gambling debts came out next. The investigation revealed he borrowed money from his father repeatedly in the months before Dad died. Loans Dad probably didn't even remember giving. But the most satisfying part wasn't their financial collapse. It was watching their carefully constructed image crumble. The friends who'd supported them, who'd believed their lies about me, started asking questions. If they lied about the will, what else did they lie about? Relatives who'd shunned me reached out with awkward apologies. Aunt Diane called crying, saying she should have trusted me. Cousins sent text messages saying they'd been manipulated. The narrative they'd built so carefully, the one where I was the villain and they were the victims, fell apart completely. Everyone could see the truth now. They'd gambled everything on a weakened, dying man. They'd exploited his confusion for their own gain. They tried to steal not just his money, but his final wishes. And they'd lost. Not just the case. Not just the money. They'd lost their reputations, their credibility, and their place in the family. The price of their greed was isolation. The original will was clear and fair. Dad had left 40% to me, 40% to Trevor, and 20% to Victoria. That had always been his plan, the one he'd discussed with me and Bernard Knox years ago. It acknowledged his love for both his children while providing for his second wife. It was reasonable and thoughtful. Exactly like Dad. But I didn't keep my share. Not all of it. I used $2 million to establish the Benjamin Bennett Memorial Scholarship Fund for students pursuing careers in engineering, Dad's lifelong passion. Another $1 million went to cancer research at the hospital where Dad was treated. The hospital that had failed him in his final days, but had also employed the doctor brave enough to tell the truth. I donated to local charities Dad had supported throughout his life. I helped struggling families pay medical bills. I funded a community center in Dad's name. Every donation carried his memory forward in ways that mattered. The money Victoria and Trevor had fought so desperately for? I used it to do good. To honor Dad properly. To show everyone what he would have wanted. Trevor tried to contest the scholarship fund, claiming I was wasting his potential inheritance. The judge denied his motion and suggested he be grateful he was getting anything at all. Victoria filed bankruptcy 6 months after the ruling. I heard she moved to another state to escape the shame. People think this story is about $15 million. They think it's about inheritance and greed and family drama. But they're wrong. This was never about the money. It was about my father's dignity. It was about making sure his final chapter wasn't written by people who'd manipulated and used him. It was about refusing to let them rewrite history to suit their needs. Dad was a good man. A brilliant engineer who'd worked his way up from nothing. A father who'd taught me to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. A person who deserved better than to have his death exploited by people who claimed to love him. The real victory wasn't the court ruling or the invalidated will. It wasn't watching Victoria and Trevor face the consequences of their actions. The real victory was peace. The quiet, steady peace of knowing I'd fought for my father when he couldn't fight for himself. I'd exposed the truth when everyone wanted me to stay silent. I'd stood up when they expected me to crumble. I rebuilt the part of myself they tried to break. I cleared Dad's name and honored his memory properly. I turned their betrayal into something meaningful. While Victoria and Trevor scrambled to salvage their ruined reputations, I built a life they never expected. A life of purpose and dignity. A life Dad would have been proud of. They tried to rewrite history, but the truth testified for me. And in the end, that was all that mattered.